More than 1,000 American soldiers are finally packing up to leave Niger. This is after the US agreed to pull out its troops from the West African country following months of tough talks.
Niger National Defense Ministry and the U.S. Defense Department have reached a disengagement agreement to carry out the withdrawal of American forces, which has already begun. It is agreed that this disengagement will end no later than September 15, 2024.
Well, in March, Niger scrapped a security pact with the US and ordered its troops to leave. The African country's military government accused Washington of undermining the sovereignty of Niger. American soldiers had been stationed there for years under a so-called counter-terrorism mission. But Nigerian officials say the US hasn't actually helped to bring peace and security to their nation. Last month, Washington also agreed to withdraw its soldiers from neighbouring Chad after military officials said that they wanted the Americans out too. Well, let's discuss this now with author and historian Gerald Horne, who's joining us from Texas. Thanks very much for joining us. I just want to ask you, why do you think the US has agreed at this point now to pull its troops out of Niger by mid-September?
Well, they didn't have that much of a choice. The Washington Post has been reporting that the Nigerian authorities were very upset by the condescension and the patronizing attitude taken by U.S. emissaries when they arrived in Niamey. The cliche now on the African continent, which bears a kernel of truth, is that when U.S. officials arrive in Africa, they ask about what your relationship is going to be towards either China or Russia or both. Apparently, the U.S. authorities were very upset with the fact that the Nigerian authorities were bent on getting a higher price for their precious commodities, including uranium, which had been going to France, the former colonial master, for a pittance. And the Nigerian authorities wanted to negotiate with Iran, which upset the U.S. authorities quite tremendously. I should also make a footnote with regard to your previous story on Congo. According to the New York Times website, the attempted coup involved U.S. nationals in the Congo. And in fact, according to the New York Times, the U.S. ambassador in the Congo has confirmed the participation of U.S. nationals. So what this bespeaks is the hysteria of the U.S. administration and the U.S. authorities with regard to the vast raw materials in Congo, in Niger, and the prospect that these resources may be slipping through their fingers. And instead, you see the Nigerians in particular seeking to negotiate with the People's Republic of China to pump oil from a source in Niger through a 1,900-kilometer pipeline to Benin on the Atlantic coast to be shipped around the Cape to China. The Chinese National Petroleum Corporation has supplied $400 million to the authorities in Niger, which undoubtedly will do wonders for health and education for the Nigerian masses.
We know that the Americans said that they were sending troops in previously to help with security to nations like Niger and Chad. But both these African countries have said it hasn't actually helped them bring security. What do you make of that? What do you make of the fact that the US seems to have failed in what it said it was intending to do?
Well, I think that the African authorities feel that the United States is conflicted. It's well known that over the decades, the United States has collaborated with these religious zealots. Witness Afghanistan from the 1970s up until the ouster of the United States in 2021. It's well known that these religious zealots oftentimes are supported by certain Gulf Arab regimes, which in turn are close to the United States of America. And I think that the Chadian authorities and the Nigerian authorities have reason to suspect that the United States is not operating in good faith when they say that they are bent and determined on routing these religious zealots, when everyone knows that the United States oftentimes collaborates fruitfully, I'm afraid to say, with these very same zealots.
Now, we've had quite a lot of reaction, not just from US officials, but also the mainstream media, who've said that the problems the US has had in Africa is as a result of Russia and its disinformation, and this is why it's being forced to withdraw from Niger and Chad. What do you think Moscow has exactly to do with this?
Well, I don't think you should take that seriously. It barely passes the giggle test as an attempt by the U.S. authorities to throw dust in the eyes of the African masses. That is to say that the present correlation of forces globally suggests that China is able to supply these African countries with the economic wherewithal that they need to improve the living standards of their people. And Russia, which has a problem that it has dealt with successfully in terms of combating religious zealotry, is much better positioned to assist these African countries in combating that very same phenomenon. And so Washington needs to wake up and realize these realities rather than trying to mislead African nations, which obviously are not going to go for this kind of nonsense.
Gerald, always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thanks very much for joining us here. That's author and historian Gerald Horne.